Jacksonville Jaguars fans, welcome into Duval Daily, presented by GenJag.com, Wednesday, April 16th. Again, just over 1 week away from the 2025 NFL Draft. So that's all we're going to be talking about here for the most part, unless we have some breaking Jaguars news at some point or other. But ESPN has kind of been the source for me of a lot of intrigue the last couple of days with some of the content they're putting out for all 32 teams, and specifically the Jacksonville Jaguars. And Ben Solak, who I absolutely love the way he thinks about football, his mind, his coverage of the draft. Ben Solak of ESPN, formerly of The Ringer, Locked On NFL Draft, the Draft Network. I mean, Ben Solak has had a rapid rise to the top of the industry, and I do think it's well-deserved. But looking at his plan for the Jacksonville Jaguars with this draft, and he kind of focuses on the first couple days of the draft, that's completely fair. The first couple days of the draft is where most teams will either make or lose their money in the 2025 and every NFL draft, right? Like the first 2 days is the most critical part. If you're able to get any hits on day 3, that's a major win. Beyond guys that are just like core special teamers, little role players that can do 1 or 2 things for you, right? Like if you're getting anything beyond that on day 3, that is just an absolute home run. A high impact player on day 3, very rare. It can happen. And the goal is to find guys like that. But you also have to fill out your roster for special teams and depth purposes and specific roles. So I get why you would focus your attention on the first 2 days of the draft, first 3 rounds. I think rightfully so. And so this is kind of a 3-tiered plan for Benjamin Solak and the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm excited to get into it. Really appreciate y'all tuning in. If you enjoy the content here, obviously it's all Jags all the time. Please hit that like and subscribe button. Helps out a ton. So with the Jaguars' first overall pick in the first round at 5th overall, Solak says Jags should trade down. And I agree with him completely. We've been talking about this for months. I think if you're sitting there at 5 overall, you, in this class, unless Travis Hunter falls to you, maybe Abdul Carter, you should probably trade down. Look, I love Mason Graham. I love his game. There's a lot of really, really good defensive tackles in this class. And Solak points that out and says there's good talent for tackle at 36, defensive tackle. And let's not forget, if you trade down, depending on how far you trade down, I mean, if you trade down into 10 or later, I think Derek Harmon should be in play. I think a little bit later than that, probably Darius Alexander should be in play. If you believe in the person that you're getting in Walter Nolan, he should be in play because he has as much potential as anyone in this draft class to be a dominant football player. You got some work to do to get there, right? But again, he says they should trade down. But if they don't trade down, Mason Graham is a fine option. That's the only player he lists at 5 for the Jaguars, and he is the consensus guy for good reason. He's my 4th overall prospect in this class. I think he projects as a very good interior defensive lineman who will specialize in interior penetration, but also be able to have the versatility to line up and defend the run from a lot of different spots. That's how I view Mason Graham. So we're pretty much on the same exact track here. Trade down or take Mason Graham. I love that. I think he's on the money. Now, this next part is what's really interesting. He says cornerback is an overrated need for the Jaguars. He likes the signing of Jordan Lewis. Obviously, Tyson Campbell going to be a starter, and he likes Jarian Jones. I like Jarian Jones a lot too. And you probably heard me talking about earlier today, like, unless you're taking a corner in the top couple rounds, probably, in the first round or at 36, I don't know that you're getting a corner better than Jarian Jones. I just don't. And so then what is the point of taking a corner? if he's not better than Jarian Jones, right? What is the point? Because you have Tyson Campbell's going to be a starter. Jordan Lewis is going to be a starter. If you're not drafting someone that can clearly have a higher level of talent and overall play than Jarian Jones, at least in your projection, there's really no point because you have some depth. I mean, Buster Brown and DeAndre Prince, you've got some depth there. So there's no point in taking a corner really early, in the third round, right? 70, 88, unless you think they're going to be a starter for you. I'm starting to feel like there might not be guys on the board that I really project to be better football players, better outside corners than Jarian. And so I can kind of get that. I like Jarian. I do. I like Jordan Lewis as well. I like Tyson Campbell. You're making a bet, though. If you go into the season and that's your top three and you don't really have another option outside, you're making a pretty big bet. You are, because you haven't really seen Jarian outside. You haven't seen Jordan Lewis consistently outside in a long time anyways. So that's an interesting one. I like it because I love Jarian Jones. Jordan Lewis, I think, is a fantastic nickel. Tyson Campbell's a very good outside corner. So I'm not all the way out on this. Now, I do think if you have the potential to draft a Savone Revel at 36, Will Johnson, if you trade down in the first round, these guys are clearly tiers above what you have on the outside, right? Outside of Tyson Campbell, in my opinion. So if you have the opportunity to do that potentially, I don't think you should shy away from corner. But I also don't think you need to force the issue at corner in the third round unless specific guys fall to that spot. That's how I'm viewing that right now. And even more interesting than his thoughts on cornerback, linebacker, off-ball linebacker, according to Benjamin Solak, is an area the Jaguars need to focus. Yeah. I can just see Jaguars fans on draft night if they go get a linebacker at 36 overall, which is what he suggests. The ire, the outrage, if the Jaguars actually go pick up another linebacker. That would mean on the current roster, the Jaguars have a top-of-the-market free agent linebacker, Foye Oluokun. He's not been a free agent for a while, but when he was signed, he was a top-of-the-market free agent linebacker. He's still one of the more expensive off-ball linebackers in the league. A first-round pick in Devin Lloyd, who they used a second and a fourth to acquire. A third-round pick in Chad Muma. A fourth-round pick in Ventrell Miller. And a second-round pick, top of the second-round pick, in Carson Schlesinger, the UCLA linebacker. Now, what's so funny about this personally for me is that I think Carson Schlesinger belongs in the first round. I think he's a fantastic prospect. And Solak points out that Foye is, about to be 30, and obviously expensive player. Devin Lloyd going into a contract year, potentially. We don't know exactly what they're going to do with the 50-year option yet, but I've predicted that they're probably not going to pick that up. Carson Schlesinger. The talent, absolutely love it. But just this franchise going after another off-ball linebacker, it would be really interesting too, just like looking at how the Rams have kind of valued off-ball linebacker. They've been a little bit, I will say this, they have not nearly invested the amount of resources over the years at off-ball linebacker that Trent Baalke and the Jacksonville Jaguars have. They have not shown as much interest in off-ball linebacker. So there's a lot of different layers to this, and James Gladstone is not going to be an exact copy of what the Rams have done, right? And every draft is different, presents different opportunities, challenges, etc. Carson Schlesinger, though, I'll tell you what, if they draft him at 36, I think they're getting a good football player. Very good athlete, good size, doesn't miss tackles. But his calling card, his key trait, it's his coverage ability. I think the way he can see the game as a coverage linebacker, and then his athleticism and his feet, no wasted movements. I feel like he's always taking a step in the right direction, and just constantly in phase in coverage. As a linebacker, that's rare coming out of college. It's very rare. And he's a former walk-on. How was he a walk-on? I have no idea. But he's a stud. And so if they go get him at 36, I think a lot of fans are going to be pissed off. And from a roster building standpoint, in 2025, it's a little bit confusing. Now, long term, and again, just from a talent standpoint, hell yeah. So that would be a really interesting one. And you've had a lot of differing views on Devin Lloyd. We talked about this morning as well. Ollie Connolly, who does a great job covering the league, loves linebacker play. He thinks that Devin Lloyd played at like an all-pro level last year. A lot of Jaguars fans don't think he should ever see the field again. I'm somewhere in the middle. Which is a not the best place to be, right? For a former first-round pick, who I was really high on coming in. I think that he makes a ton of great plays. I think he's usually in the right spot, but like the 10 to 15% of the time where he's not in the right spot, he's really, really not in the right spot. I've seen that with a lot of guys on the Jaguars defense. He gets more blame than most from fans. It's a fascinating situation. I think the one thing I will say, Devin Lloyd probably is overall a better run defender than Carson Schlesinger. And again, Schlesinger doesn't miss tackles, but there's times where he can get eaten up a little bit more by linemen, by blockers, than I think Devin Lloyd does. I think Lloyd is so good downhill against the run. I think Schlesinger has the ability to be very, very good and effective in that role. But again, his primary role and calling card, the why of this player is his coverage chops and his athleticism, and he doesn't miss tackles. That'd be wild. Just wild to see. Again, the Jaguars having a roster that has a top end of the league linebacker veteran from a contract. I'm going to look up linebacker contracts just to see where he's at right now. But a top of the market type of guy. Where is Foyer? So the way they restructured his deal, it actually is a bit lower, but he's been making a lot of money at linebacker. They have his deal on over the cap at $10 million per year. But that's like an extension on top of an extension. When he originally signed with the Jags, I think it was $14.5 per year. Either way, still a, linebacker that's making about top 10 money at the position. Close to it. A first-round pick, a second-round pick in Carson Schlesinger, a third-round pick in Chad Muma, a fourth-round pick in Ventrell Miller. I mean, goodness gracious. That would be wild. But I do love Carson Schlesinger, so it's an interesting foil for me. Then the final point that Solak focuses on is they got to go get a starting wide receiver. Again, I completely agree. So we're pretty much on the same page with a lot of this stuff. I think there's a little bit of interesting comments with the linebackers. Just an interesting dialogue and thought, all that. How the Jaguars handle linebacker moving forward is going to be fascinating. But he thinks they should go get a receiver. He mentions Jack Besh. Yeah, we've talked about Jack Besh a lot as a potential Jacksonville Jaguar. I think he makes a lot of sense. Solak says, Jack Besh is reminiscent of Cooper Kupp and Chris Godwin in usage, so he'd be a perfect fit for the Jaguars. He also mentions Kyle Williams, projects to be a slot in the NFL where his quickness can shine, but he has enough skill against press coverage that he can moonlight outside. Yeah, I think Kyle Williams can move all around the formation. If you've been paying attention here, you know I love Kyle Williams. And Jack Best, just like his physicality, his strong hands, his dirty work mindset, I agree that that would be a pretty good fit for the Jacksonville Jaguars. So, really interesting thoughts from Ben Solak on the Jaguars, particularly at cornerback and linebacker. I think everybody would agree the Jaguars need a starting receiver to go with Brian Thomas Jr. I think everybody would agree. Well, not everyone. A lot of people. Consensus is trade down or take Mason Graham. So, would love to know what y'all think about Ben Solak's takes on the Jacksonville Jaguars and how they should address this 2025 NFL draft. Let me know in the comment section below. And if you enjoy the content, please like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.